seen this? Wait a second. I know what I must do. You see, F-Zero is like Rob and the Celtics. Their impact was massive, but their only modern day remnant is just a crossover. Now don't get me wrong, I think Rob is fascinating, and Celtic culture is a core part of the Zelda series, but it's still kind of depressing to see them go with such little fanfare. F-Zero, on the other hand, differs quite a bit. With so many racing games now, it seems redundant to cry about this one being ignored. But if that's the case, then why are there so many people that want to come back? Well, maybe it'll help if to take a step back in time. So video game companies have been at each other's throats since more or less the dawn of time. Atari and Intellivision, Sony and Microsoft, even Sony and Nintendo. Sony gets around, but none of them hold a candle to the sheer widespread popularity of Sega and Nintendo.
Power's free. What Nintendo? Buy a 16-bit Genesis system between now and October 31st and get an extra game.
It seems redundant to say Nintendo was the gods of the video game industry from the late 80s to the early 90s. But just for the few who don't know, I'll do a little rundown. After Atari's oopsie and the video game crash in North America, home video game systems were bona fide fads to anyone who's anyone. If you wanted to play video games, you either had to get some quarters or take psychedelics, and either include going outside and socializing. Ew, disgusting. But when all hope seems lost, Nintendo tricked the stores into thinking the NES was a toy with the power of Rob, the robot, and much pleading. But that's a story for another day. Get to the goddamn Birdman! Okay, so I understand why this may seem unnecessary to know, but F-Zero has had more impact to the video game industry than it may seem. So Nintendo has the NES, right? So it was cool and all, but the quality was a bit... let's just say it wasn't the best looker. Back in the day, you still had to go to arcades to really get the most out of modern video game tech. But Sega was about to change that. The NES may have been the beginning of a lot, but the Genesis was truly the Genesis for a lot in its own right. Pun intended.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This system could play games and play them good. Arcade quality in the home was the thing, and the beginning of the debate on console specs. The 16-bit Genesis seemed way cooler than Nintendo's puny 8, but Nintendo wasn't ready to fall so soon. They slapped back, and they slapped back hard.
Now you're playing with power, superpower.
The SNES was the new guy in town, and though he didn't get everyone swooning over him, he made his presence known. Nintendo knew just making a 16-bit console wouldn't do, so they baked in a secret ingredient. Mode 7. Know what Mode 7 does? I don't know. Alright, so Mode 7 gave developers the ability to stretch, bend, motion, mash all of the game sprites and stuff, I think. Now the thing about that's important was the fact that Sega did not have this. So Nintendo can make way better games in specific genres that the Genesis simply couldn't do, like racing games. Well, F-Zero was kind of born out of desire and also restrictions, because you see, they needed to make a racing game, but cars were hard to animate, especially at that time when you're restricted to pixels. And nonetheless, they also have very new hardware that they have yet to master yet. So, you know what they did? threw realism right out the window. So more or less, they just didn't want to make the wheels on the cars. It was just too time consuming for too new technology. So their solution was to more or less make them flying cars. The one thing led to the next, then the next, then the next, mixed Batman in, and now you have Celestial Speed Racer going head to head with the Yellow Circle. Well, I obviously skipped some steps, but you get the gist. Now, why do I personally feel like this franchise needs to come back, and why I'm so excited that it is right now? It is a product of the era. It was made from such specific circumstances. It is such a unique franchise, and nothing else can truly replicate its glory. Alright, so the reason I made this video is because recently F-Zero 99 came out, and according to my calculations, the game came out at least over an hour ago. And I know you all may be confused on why me, a person that was born like years after the most recent original release came out, actually gives a shit about this game. But and yes, I know that it's a shitty racing game from the SNES, and yes, I know it is also the only reason people remember it is due to a character in Smash Bros. That has very few references to the actual source material. But what do I have to prove? I won't be a pretentious Nintendo fan too, guys.